Hello, fellow woodworkers. I would like to show you today a Japanese joining technique. I saw this at the Portland Japanese Garden, where there's an exhibit that features an architect named Kengo Kuma. And he has created this joint using ancient techniques to create several different pieces of furniture and entire buildings with. It was a little tricky, but I found it very interesting. So bear with me as I try to show you how to make it. I am using white maple for this construction, as it's very helpful if you have a very hard wood that's easy to work with and hold its shape without spalling or splitting. The first thing I did on this sample was to create enough material that is 1 1/4 inches by 1 1/4 inches. It's very important that this be exactly square. And so all three pieces in this example are exactly 1 1/4 by 1 1/4. And I have labeled them 1, 2, and 3 to help me with the assembly and to use to work with the photographs that I took at the Japanese Museum. Here you see piece number 1. Piece number 2, a very tricky little piece that has a completely rounded section in between the two squares. And piece number 3 that you see has a drilled out section to receive the rounded piece of number 2. One of the key components of this is setting your dado blade at exactly half the dimension of the piece of wood. So in this case, it was 5/8 of an inch. Here you see the dado blade set with 5/8 inch thickness and a height of 5/8 of an inch. I've also located the fence so that the center line of my cuts are left and right of the saw blade. So after one cut is complete, I can simply turn the piece over and make the other cut. And even so, additional cuts can be made in a similar fashion to complete the particular piece. So this piece was relatively easy because it's pretty just straight cuts. You see a little tiny rabbet on the bottom, and that's important in the assembly later on. Piece number 2, again, is created with a series of passes through the dado blade, enough so that you will be left with a square block that connects the left and the right side. This square block needs to be sanded and shaped into a 5/8 inch diameter round. This actually took a lot less time than I thought, using a rasp and a wood file followed up by 80 grit sandpaper to create a near perfect round shape. Piece number 3 might be considered the most tricky because you need to create this rounded section for the rounded dowel to appear to happen in the connection. This was the first part of this process for this particular piece, using a Forstner bit to create this hollow. Then it was a series of passes made with the dado blade to complete this particular shape. Being very careful of its placement and its location, here is the same point that was run through the dado blade for the other pieces. This is slightly different. Here is the 1 1/4 inch dimension we were talking about, and you can see how it lines up with the tangent of the circle. To make sure we get a straight edge, I scored this location prior to running it through the drill bit. Now for the assembly. Taking piece number 3 that has the bored out section in it, it's pretty obvious where piece number 2 goes. This is an important relationship because you can see that it rotates freely. This rotation is what allows you to connect the entire piece together without glue and make a successful joint. Now the tricky part is trying to decide where this one goes, and you can see this piece hooks onto one of the other ones and simply slides home. And that little dado, that little rabbit that I was telling you about, is fairly important in terms of its getting this whole thing to fit together. A little tapping might be necessary. And the final action is done by rotating the piece that has the round dowel on it to create the joint. There you have it. The next step will be to use this idea in some furniture, where these will be longer pieces connected by several verticals to make like a table base. That'll be the next lesson.